Good day. Welcome. This is your Daily Med with Lady V. Today's session, Psalm 55, verse 12 through verse 15. Psalm 55, verse 12 through 15. It says, if an enemy were insulting me, I could endure it. If a foe were rising against me, I could hide. But it is you, a man like myself, my companion, my close friend, with whom I once enjoyed sweet fellowship at the house of God, as we walk about among the worshippers. Let death take mine enemies by surprise. Let them go down alive to the realm of the dead, for evil finds lodging amongst them. Today, as we look at the psalmist, as he is crying out, he was crying out because he was betrayed by a personal friend. We would say a comrade. We would say a mutual counselor. A person whom he has fellowship with, serving God. And in this passage, we see that it was fulfilled, and it has a double fulfillment. One with David being betrayed by his personal friend and confidant counselor Ahithophel. We also see it being fulfilled in Jesus Christ being betrayed by his personal disciple, his chosen apostle Judas. So at the heart of David's complaint, of course, is his cruel betrayal. He said his pain would have been more endurable if the culprit had been an open foe, an avowed enemy. But in fact, this was happening under the quiet. This was happening behind his back. He says if the taunts and the insults had come from an outsider, an adversary, the psalmist says, listen man, I would have just known that this person is my enemy. He's working against me, and I would have just stayed out of his way. But it was one of his own. And that's why when we are betrayed, it is so hurtful, and most of the time it comes from a companion, a loved one, a trusted friend. And we will say, oh, we were stabbed or we were knifed in the back. It was one with whom the psalmist used to have sweet fellowship. It means that by social companionship that grows out of religion. So he says they had a good foundation. They worship God together. He says from this friendship it yield profit because this friend could counsel me. It says it yield pleasure because we have sweet fellowship. He said it leads to enthusiasm. We were delighted when we walk in the company of one another to the house of God. And David was hoping, man, that this relationship would be maintained. But even when we have relationships like this, we will see from the scripture today that they have to be carefully monitored. They have to be watched, because at any time the adversary, the enemy, can creep up, and our friends and our loved ones suddenly becomes our foes. He says we have sweet fellowship. We walk together in the courts of the tabernacle. So this anguish was made complete and bearable. He couldn't bear it when he discovered that this was his personal counselor. He says, I cannot understand that he has become a conspirator against me. 2 Samuel 15 and verse 31. David says, I would be able to bear the affliction. In fact, it would be expected of an enemy, and I would bear the injury at least. Remember, this confidential counselor and friend is acquainted with David's character, with all his secret plans. Yet he went and he conspired with David's own son and asserted that David was not a good person, meaning he was a bad man and he was not suited for the throne to rule as the king. So they said these things against him, and they conspired with the people and had the people on their side. We see Judas doing the same thing, this betrayal being fulfilled in the life of Jesus Christ himself. In St. John 13 and 18, there is so much true facts about Judas betraying Jesus as it is of Ahithophel betraying David. We can look at a few. Number one, both Judas and Ahithophel were friends of their master. And we see that in verse 12. We also see that both Ahithophel and Judas betrayed and reproached their former friend. Number three, we see that both Judas and Ahithophel were lovers of their masters. At one point, they loved them. Number four, we also see that they magnified themselves, both Ahithophel and Judas, against their best friends. Number five, we see that both Judas and Ahithophel were untrue to the trust that their friend, both Jesus and David, had placed in them. Number six, we see that both Judas and Ahithophel were equal in trust. Ahithophel counseled David. He knew what his heart was saying. He knew his secret. Jesus trusted Judas, and so he was his treasurer. Number seven, we see that both Judas and Ahithophel guides our counsels. Number eight, we see that both men were acquaintances known by their master or their friend. In verse 13, we see that both men had sweet fellowship with their masters. We also see that both had fellowship and communion. They talk with one another. Jesus says Judas ate with him. It's a familiar friend. They walk and talk together. They counsel together. They eat together. They worship together. And we see this both with Judas and Ahithophel. So the psalmist says, God, in verse 15, 14, I'm calling for judgment upon the wicked. He says, let death seize upon the conspirators and all the co-conspirators. He says they deserve sudden death, a quick trip to hell, The wicked can and will go to hell. Psalm 9 verse 17. It says the wicked shall be turned into hell. David, out of anguish, pain, maybe we could say desperation, called for the punishment of these people. His son Absalom, who wanted to dethrone him, Ahithophel, who conspired against him, and all the people that were in this great conspiracy. In truth and in fact, if we go back to 2 Samuel, we will see how both Ahithophel, Absalom, and all the other co-conspirators lost their lives. This was actually fulfilled. The death of Ahithophel is recorded in 2 Samuel 17 verse 23. The death of Absalom in 2 Samuel 18, 14 and 15. And so many of Absalom's followers, how they lost their lives, up to 20,000 men in 2 Samuel 18 verses 7 and 8. So let us be true friends. If we are going to be friends, let us not be conspirers and co-conspirators with others to do harm or to do wrong or to dethrone anyone else. Because we see from the scriptures today, it is not nice to betray friends, to betray one another. Judas betrayed Jesus. He became so ashamed of himself when he realized what he did, and he hung himself. He sold Jesus out. Ahithophel did the same thing to David, and each and every one of these people that was involved in these plots lost their lives in ways that were not seemingly nice. So David prayed. He says, judge the wicked. Remember, when we do wickedness, we become wicked, and God will judge us for the things that we do. God bless you today. Thank you again for watching, and may God bless the USA.